Hey everyone, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Shannon.
And together, we're launching a brand new independent school called Acton Academy Victoria.
But this podcast is about more than just a new outlook on education.
Our school is part of a larger journey that we are on to learn what it means to be an intentional family.
Because we don't just want to see our kids get to graduation. We are looking to raise up the entrepreneurs, change makers, and leaders of tomorrow.
So thank you for joining us for another episode of The Intentional Family. Okay, we are back with episode 3, and having listened to the very first episode that we recorded together.
Ooh. Don't ever listen to yourself. It's awful.
No, for everyone who suffered through that, thank you so much for listening to episode 3. I don't know if I would have.
Yes, thank you for coming back. We deeply appreciate you.
Yes, we appreciate your love. Okay, so what we want to do today is dive into something that we referred to in our last episode, and that's rhythms. We talk a lot in our culture and context of our family and our church and our community about rhythms, but I think this is something that might be new or maybe out of the ordinary for people. And so I thought it'd be really good for us to do this because as we talked about last week, most families don't drift into intentional lives. We talked about this reality that our default is that we drift into the things that we're used to. We drift back into chaos, into what has come before us. And so if we really want to have an intentional life, it actually requires us to be intentional.
And I think a lot of that has to do with the rhythms and routines that you set up for yourself and your family, because it's really hard to be intentional when you don't do it very often.
Right.
You actually need those rhythms and routines to ground you so that it does become second nature.
Yeah, I talked about this last episode. So in learning theory, there's this recognition that most of us have these defaults that we're not aware of. We call this unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. And a lot of us get into this space where we find out what we don't know. We find out I'm not good at this or I want to grow in this area. But the problem is that we want to skip from there right to what we would call unconscious competence, which is my defaults have suddenly changed. And what we are usually missing is that there's this third step, which is called conscious competence, which means you have to be aware of the steps that you are taking, the habits that are forming you so that you can become a person who has new defaults. It's the same idea as muscle memory and piano. Why do you practice scales over and over and over again? It's so that your fingers build in this muscle memory so that eventually they just know where to go. It's the same thing with habits or rhythms. These things are there to help us actually become the type of people that we want to be, which means that we actually have to think through what are our habits? What are those things that we're regularly doing? As we think about Acton, this is actually, I think, one of the things that stood out to me most about it. You have that quote from Laura, and I think it's such a good line. What does she say?
Yeah. So in the book, Courage to Grow, which the founder, Laura Sandifer, wrote, she has this great quote, and it's our educational philosophy, essentially, that says, "We believe clear thinking leads to good decisions. Good decisions lead to the right habits. The right habits forge character, and character determines destiny."
What I love about this is what Laura is saying is, as a school, we have a outcome. We want every child to figure out their inner genius and figure out how they can use it to change the world. That's the whole drive behind Acton. Like, we care most about not graduation, but about character, about who are they becoming and how are they going to get there.
Yeah.
And so you start off with, we're not going to just default in school, which, to be honest, as we look at school as it has been, it has been a default, right?
The traditional model hasn't really changed in the last 150 years.
Right. You can go all the way back to the Prussians and their desire to build citizen soldiers who knew how to follow orders, knew how to be uniform, to obey, to be very, very much the same. And although, there's lots of ingenuity and things that are happening in the school system, it's still fundamentally the same system.
Yeah.
And, the definition of insanity is you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results.
Hoping something else will come out of it.
Right. So what I loved about Acton was that they began to say, hey, like, we don't have to go by our defaults. We're going to be really intentional. And the entire Acton system is built around this idea of how do we create different habits, different rhythms in our studio so that we can have a different outcome. And that took a lot of process, a lot of experimentation, and that's built into it. Like, we're constantly asking that question. We're constantly evaluating, and we're constantly adjusting what we're doing because we have a clear sense of where we're going.
Yeah.
So that's great for schools. But
What does that mean for a family?
Yeah. So one of the things I love is that acting is supposed to be an extension of what we're already doing in life.
Yeah.
And so what I thought would be helpful for us today to talk about is, what does it look like to be a family that has intentional rhythms?
Yeah, because I think that rhythms are so helpful for so many different ways. They ground us. They give us stability. They give our kids stability. Our kids know what day of the week it is because of the rhythms that we have on each and every day. On Fridays after school, we watch a movie because they need to decompress a little bit. On Saturday mornings, we watch cartoons, and then we have a special breakfast.
And a different kid helps with making breakfast every Saturday.
Every Saturday, yep.
And a huge part of that, again, is because when I grew up, my mom had this really intentional desire to say, I want all of my boys to be able to know how to do everything in the house by the age of 12. And I kind of internalized that. And I was like, this is a really valuable skill. Because I came out into a world where a lot of my peers didn't know how to run a house. And they were slobs, and they were undisciplined, and they were terrible roommates. And they just didn't know how to actually do a lot of this stuff that is pretty important for any human being to know how to do. And we wanted our kids to be able to have those basic skills. And we realized you can't just drop it on them when they're 18. If you want them to gain those skills, you have to start forming it in them when they're young and starting to form habits, because those habits are going to form the type of humans they are.
Absolutely. And I think when we initially started having kids, and our rhythms and routines have changed drastically over the years as we've had more kids or they've gotten older. But I think we started to realize that if we didn't set intentional rhythms for them, then culture was going to do it. Mm-hmm. And we were just going to default to what was easy or what was comfortable.
Or what everyone else was doing.
Or what everyone else was doing. Whether you go to sports every night and you miss dinner together, and so you don't have that connection time, or you're just really tired at the end of the day, so the TV just comes on and you spend the evening watching TV rather than talking to each other. And I get it. We've had times where I come home from work and I'm exhausted, and all I want to do is put the kids in front of a movie while I make dinner, because that's really easy. Sometimes I did that, let's be honest.
Yeah, I think we have to we have to really differentiate between rules, which are rigid and, they're restrictive, and they're the things that we force upon our kids, to rhythms, which are about life-giving, habit-forming, identity-shaping, predictable patterns that we're inviting our children into with us, not imposing upon them. So it's these rhythms are not just things that we foist upon our kids. They're actually things that we are doing with our family.
Yeah. So what are some of the rhythms that we should talk about today?
Well, I think one of the big ones is the importance of shared meals.
Yeah.
I think we often miss the cohesive familial nature, the ways that organic conversations can happen around the dinner table.
Absolutely. And there's ways to have deep intentionality within dinner. One of the ways that we do it is we don't have screens at the table. We don't ever have our phones at the table.
Yeah, dinners are completely tech-free.
Are tech-free. But then we have fun questions that we ask. We used to do, we got a little sick of it, so we walked away from it.
Yeah, we did high-low and something that you learned.
Yeah. So what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? And what was something that you learned? And for the most part, our kids loved it, especially our two olders. Our 3-year-olds.
She said the same thing every time.
She said the same thing every time. And it was never anything that happened that day. It was something about her falling out of a tree, which...
A tree fell on her.
Yeah.
She just
obviously never happened. And we've now moved on to fun conversation cards that our family just loves, because it asks these new questions that we would never think to ask each other. And it invites us to visit memories and come up with fun ideas and just be goofy and serious all at the same time. But it's a way for us to have high engagement at dinner. I think that's a really important piece when you're wanting to share meals or have an intentional rhythm of, say, eating supper together every day, is that there's connection. That's what I'm looking for. There's connection at the supper table. It's not everyone just head down eating, although I feel like our kids, their heads are down and they're never eating.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons that I love this is because right now, the conversations that we have aren't always super deep.
No.
But we're actually creating space that is allowing our kids to know that they have room to share what's going on. They have room to express what's happening. And I remember growing up where my family, this was a pretty common practice for my family, is that we would always eat dinners together. And as we got older, the conversations became really incredible. We would talk about politics. We'd talk about faith. We would talk about, challenges at school. And the dinner table really became a place where we as teenagers could open up. And it was like a safe place to kind of be present with our family. And we knew that it was there and was predictable. And it really became a place that I wanted to create and foster in our own family.
Absolutely.
Did you have that kind of experience as well?
I did. Yeah, we ate dinner together most nights. I don't recall everyone always being home because we did have sports, or my dad often had meetings in the evenings. But I do remember us sitting down every day having dinner. And honestly, I don't remember a lot of the conversations that we had, but I do recall the comfortability of knowing that like every dinner time we were together and we could talk to each other.
Yeah. Another one that I think is really important is what we in kind of the religious sphere call Sabbath rest. And I don't think you necessarily need to be religious to understand the value of regular spaces of rest, of decompression, of taking time away from the busyness of life. In the Bible, the way that Sabbath was seen, especially in agrarian society, is that it was a time in which you kind of let the weight of the world go. You trusted that God was in control and you could just enjoy the world for that he had made, right? And again, I'm not saying everyone who's going to listen to this is going to have that belief, but I do think it's important to understand the wisdom in that. We as people can get so caught up in the busyness that we forget to just simply rest and enjoy one another. And I think when our families don't have that space, again, we default to these other things. We default to screens. We default to busyness. We default to running around with like a chicken with its head cut off. And eventually that strains your family. It strains your relationships. It strains your ability to be known with each other. It strains your own inner strength because you're constantly expending energy.
You're constantly pouring out and never having that space to be poured back into.
Yeah, totally. And so for us, there's kind of two aspects to Sabbath rest. We have what I call like the spiritual aspect to Sabbath rest. For us, it's connecting with our faith community. We're part of a church, and so we attend our church gatherings on Sunday mornings. But that's really like a small part. The bigger part for you and I is this kind of refresh, rest, enjoy the world that God has made, and kind of take a step back from feeling a need to control it. And we've sort of created like some guidelines around this. Like we try not to do housework on our day that we take as a Sabbath. We take Saturdays just because I work on Sundays.
Yeah, Sunday's a work day for you.
But it starts really on Friday night. Like after the kids go to bed, you and I are like, we want to do something that we both enjoy, that relaxes us. And so that Sabbath, that rest space starts with fun. We make air pop popcorn with
so much butter.
A ridiculous amount of butter. Yeah, I swear since we switched from margarine to butter, our bills have gone up because we just go through so much butter.
So worth it.
So we do that. We make popcorn. We get drinks. You get your G&T. I get my rum and Coke. And we sit down and we watch a movie. And it's just a time for us to simply step out of the week, enjoy one another, enjoy preparing ourselves for our family the next day. And then Saturday mornings, our kids now have this really predictable rhythm. They get up at 8, they come into our room, they sit in bed with us, and we watch some old school Disney cartoons. Right now we're watching Tailspin, which is okay.
I dozed through it.
You get a little extra sleep. But they love it. Our kids love it. And then we talked about this earlier, I believe, but we also have this habit of saying, hey, we want our kids to learn some basic life skills and spend time with them. And so Saturday, we make a big special breakfast. And it's the same kind of 4 rotation meals. It's like crepes or pancakes or waffles or, kind of like your normal like eggs and bacon breakfast. Something more than what we would have on a normal morning.
Yeah.
And one of our kids is always set to help us. And they actually fight over it. This is crazy
They fight
thing.
over it. They always yell about whose turn is it to bake.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about this is not only are they just enjoying something, but they're actually learning natural skills. Like Isla the other day, she was learning fractions because she had to understand the difference between half a cup and a whole cup. cup or a quarter cup and a whole cup, and helping her figure out teaspoons and tablespoons. She's actually learning really basic skills that she's going to need for the rest of her life, but in a fun and enjoyable and relaxed atmosphere. And so that's, we do that. We have the sit down breakfast. We kind of have an easy morning. And then most Saturdays we try and just make sure we're outside.
Yeah. So we have a Labradoodle named Daisy, who is adorable and so energetic. So,
which is crazy because she's like 8 years old, almost 9.
She's like a puppy still. So we have to walk her. And so Saturdays is a day when we all walk the dog together. And so we pick a hike and we spend, hour and a half, 2 hours just out of the house. Rain, shine, doesn't really matter. We're outside and we are going for a hike. And it's one of the highlights, I think, of our week for our kids because it's all 6 of us on an adventure. Like we go on adventures. They get to help us choose which hike it is. And honestly, we usually have to be like, no, not that one. That's so hard. Please don't make me hike that mountain.
Yeah, they love Mount Wells. If you haven't ever tried it, it's a great little hike.
Great hike.
But it is, when you're carrying a 5-month-old, it's a little treacherous, especially in the rain.
Yeah.
It's not bad in the summer, but it is steep and it is a lot of work, but they love it until they actually get on it. Then they complain about it.
But we get to be outside. We get to move our bodies.
We're spending time
together, fresh air. There's just so much value to just going on a hike every week together.
Our kids are enjoying the beauty of the outdoors. They're getting exercise. We get that side-by-side connection as a family. So you get to oftentimes have just really interesting conversations with your kids in that side-by-side space.
You hear more about what happened in their week, of things that maybe didn't come up at the dinner table, of areas where they're struggling. I know our 7-year-old will often come up to me and just start to unload a little bit of what's been happening in her heart or her mind or what she's thinking through and processing. Or even our 5-year-old as well does that with us. And it's just a great space to just connect with them. Because I think one of the things that we as parents really wanted to be intentional about was that connection. And we suck at it a lot, where we miss the boat so often when it comes to connecting with our kids. But this is a space that works so well in that connection.
Yeah, and that really kind of, we could talk more about our Sabbath rhythm, but you and I have tried to create space there for us to connect as husband and wife, because we know that the marriage relationship doesn't just stay awesome. It requires work. And so Saturdays are a time where we set some space aside to, we call it a date, but really it's like a check-in.
Yeah.
And we've slowly been moving it to other days because we're finding Saturdays are getting a little bit harder as our kids are getting older and they're involved in things, and birthday parties and stuff always happen on Saturdays, and so you're
now that they don't nap,
that.
It's really hard to have a conversation.
Yes, so we're learning to adapt that one, but it does flow kind of naturally into another rhythm that I think is really important for families, which is just the adventure rhythm. How are you as a family taking time to adventure together, to stir the imagination, to enjoy something new and exciting that is a shared experience as a family? Because that actually is really important for a variety of reasons. One, I think, is that when you stimulate that adventure sense in your kids, it makes them more willing to try things that they wouldn't necessarily try by default.
Yeah, it's helping them take risks, learn how to fail. I remember doing this with my family as a child, is when my younger brother decided to quit hockey. They decided that instead of one child being in a sport that took up all of our time, we would do a family sport. And so we picked up skiing. And we lived in Alberta, and so we were close enough to the mountains that we could go every other weekend. We went out and we skied as a family every other weekend, which is wild to me now that I have children to do that. But honestly, that was some of the best times in my life, was that we would get up at 4 a.m. to do the 4-hour drive to the mountains, and we would spend the entire day racing and having adventures and climbing. And
different families are going to find this in different ways, but it really does just make me sad when kids don't know how to go outside and just explore and have fun and catch wildlife and learn how to treat it and learn how to respect it and learn how to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what are a couple other rhythms that we could talk about?
One is like a rhythm of responsibility. So allowing kids to have meaningful responsibility, which means they have chores. There's expectations that they contribute to our household. We kind of started this more formally around the age of 6. So our oldest is the one who at the moment has the most chores, but like it's her job in the morning to unload the dishwasher. And it's her job to put away her laundry and 2 of her siblings' laundry or feed the dog. And they all have the expectation that they make their bed first thing in the morning.
Yeah, this is one, I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but Jordan Peterson, I believe, has this line that making your bed in the morning is your first step in the fight against chaos. And I think for us, one of the things that I want our kids to understand is that, again, intentionality matters. Your default, that chaos space, is always hanging over you. And the first thing you do in your bed is like, I'm not going to just leave it undone. And I remember having these conversations with one of my brothers when we were teenagers, and he was like, why should I make it? It's just going to get unmade again. And I just remember this intrinsic feeling in my soul that was like, no, this matters. And it's probably because I'm like an anal retentive type A personality.
Because it definitely does not matter that much to me.
No, but I do think that, again, that piece of understanding that intentionality is a fight. And making your bed, something as simple as habitually making your bed, of ordering the chaos, is actually an important piece of that fight. And so even our 3-year-old, and Emmy, she does not do a great job of making her bed, but
and she needs a lot of help.
She needs a lot of help, but she's learning to do it. She's learning to order her life. She's learning how to build habits that are helping her continue to move forward with stability. Yeah. Some other responsible things that I think are important is just inviting your kids into the things that you do naturally. Helping with dinner. We talked about helping with breakfast earlier.
Yeah. So I'm guilty of this because I don't always want our kids to help me with it.
It actually takes extra work.
Because it takes me so much longer. And so this one is hard for me, is allowing them to cook dinner with me, because I don't love the inconvenience that it is. And I'm trying to, and that's one where I'm actively trying to fight my own instinct on that one, to say like, you know what, I could just do it easier. I could just do it quicker if you went off and played.
Yeah, sometimes intentionality has a cost.
It absolutely has a cost. Like, it took me so much longer to make dinner tonight because our oldest was helping me and she wanted to do everything. And you're like, oh no, like, can you cut the mushrooms a little bit thinner? Or, oh, please don't open the oven yet. Like, oof, we're not ready for that. But she helped me make dinner, and then she helped me do all the dishes, and she was just so proud of herself and so pleased when we actually ate this dinner, which at first she loved and then she didn't. But now she was like, well, I made it. I got to own that. And I was like, that's right, you do.
And she took ownership. And again, as we're tying this back into Acton, one of the things I loved about Acton is that it really is all about creating responsibility. And I think the reason for that is when you offer our kids responsibility, it actually honors who they are. Like, it actually says, like, we think that you can do this. So that's giving them dignity. It's offering them ownership. It's not just this thing that I do for you, but it's this thing that you have, you're bought into. You have skin in the game.
Well, and it shows them that they're capable. Like Isla, our oldest, today said to me while I was trying to convince her not to make dinner with me, was that she's like, Mom, I am much more capable than you are letting me be.
Yeah, she's a little active disciple now.
Oh my God. Child, why?
But it's true.
Fine, you can make dinner with me.
True. I think one of the problems that we often have as parents is that we assume our kids cannot do as much. And we've been reading through the Little House on the Prairie series, and when you hear what these younger kids are capable of doing back then, you realize, no, part of the problem is that we're just not offering the expectations. We're not inviting them into the ownership. And so they default then to not taking ownership.
Well, and when you don't expect anything of your kids, then they don't have any expectations of themselves. And they also don't rise to anything. When you have higher expectations, when you allow them to take ownership and be responsible, then that is the person they will become.
Yeah, maybe the last rhythm that I want to talk about, because we are definitely coming up against time here, is the rhythms of celebration. Now, I think almost every family who cares and loves about their kids are going to do simple things like celebrate birthdays.
And Christmas.
Seasonal celebrations. But I think sometimes we forget that we're creatures that are habit formed. And these little habits that we're doing with our kids, for us, our kids' bedtime routines, like those things are actually creating these anchor points in them, these anchor points in their childhood and their memory.
Mhm.
And they might not remember every incident, but they're going to remember the general feelings that came with that.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I love about Acton is that we actually, as Acton owners, are thinking strategically about how we mark moments. How do we celebrate achievements? How do we celebrate times of year? And I think the same is true of families. Not just how do you celebrate birthdays, but how do you actually recognize and celebrate the big moments, the first day of school.
Mhm.
My mom, when I was growing up, our very first day of school, she would get one of those like giant pieces of like cardstock paper, and she would roll it up into a cone, and she would call it a cornucopia, and she would fill it with candy and a book. And I still remember that to this day. Like kindergarten, I get this giant cornucopia, and it was so special to me. And it was like, oh, I'm starting this new cool adventure, and it anchored me in that this is a good thing. And I think the same is true of our kids now. Like they need to have these moments, and we as a family need to think about how we create these moments. How do you celebrate the end of school? How do you celebrate a good achievement? Those are all things that, again, require intentionality.
Yeah.
And when you leave them to a default, they slip away.
And you miss all these moments that are very much worth celebrating. And I know this is something that we don't always do really well, but
this is a growth area.
Like this is definitely a growth area for us. Like my mom used to do Smartie cookies on first and last day of school, and every year I mean to do it, and every year I forget.
Right, because it's a default, right?
It's a default.
You're missing that intentional moment.
I miss that intentional moment.
You haven't put the time and forethought needed to create that habit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So as we're kind of finishing off this episode, a couple of things that we want to just leave you with is, how do you get started? Maybe you're already someone who has way better rhythms than us, and you're like, okay, I'm just glad that you understand this way of life. But maybe you're someone who's like, man, we don't know how to do this. This sounds really good to us, but we don't know how to do it. And we are not experts.
No.
We care a lot about this stuff, but there's so many areas that we need to grow.
I think the first question you almost need to ask is, what am I training into my kids? Whether it's intentional or unintentional, we're all training and discipling them into something. But what is that?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it that you need to be more intentional, or where you need to actually review what are our rhythms? I think that's usually the first step, is what are our natural rhythms that we see ourselves.
What are our defaults?
What are our defaults? Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we doing every week that's consistent and regular? And do we want to be doing those things every single week?
Well, and I think some of the things that you do, you could just say, how do we add intentionality to this? Right?
Yeah.
You're going to eat a meal. So how do we make our meals intentional?
You're going to put your kids to bed.
How do we make that time intentional? One of the things I would encourage you not to do is don't try and redesign your whole life overnight.
Oh gosh, that's so overwhelming.
Yeah,
that's just a recipe for failure.
It will kill you. So just choose one thing, like a weekly family dinner, a Saturday adventure, a bedtime prayer or bedtime routine, a rest rhythm, a Sabbath rhythm. And I think just remember that consistency matters more than complexity. So it doesn't have to be something crazy. Just start small, something that you can maintain regularly.
As we're finishing this off, I think we hope that you will ask yourself just this one question, is what rhythm could we introduce that would shape the culture of our family?
And just remember the families that you respect the most, the ones that you admire, the ones that you're like, man, I really wish we could be like that. Remember that those families didn't happen by accident. They built rhythms that slowly shaped who they became. It didn't happen overnight. And it is actually possible for you to do the same, but it takes one small step to start.
Yeah. So thank you so much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you next week.